Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's Connected TV event hosted by IAB Europe. My name is Ryan Martin, and I am Program Manager for Global Business Marketing at TikTok for Business Europe. And I'm also the chair of Europe's Brand Advertising Committee and have the pleasure of moderating today's event. And thank you very much for joining us. As many of you know, IAB is the European level association for digital marketing and advertising ecosystem. And through its membership of national IABs, media and technology and marketing companies, its mission is to lead representation and promote industry collaboration across Europe. One of the ways that we do this is by bringing people together through events like we have today. Today, we've got a stellar lineup of speakers, moderators, and panelists in all of our sessions. And we'll shortly hear from the Senior Digital Advertising Analyst, Tom Suttle, as he presents an overview of the latest stats and facts from the connected TV ecosystem. We'll then hear from our panels who will discuss the latest connected TV developments across Europe, the challenges and opportunities for targeting and measuring connected TV campaigns. And finally, we'll end with a keynote presentation from the IAB Tech Lab on the latest connected TV advertising standards. So a jam-packed and really exciting and intriguing agenda for us today. I think it's going to be a really fascinating couple of hours, and we're really grateful to all of our experts for taking the time out today to share their knowledge and their expertise. And I just want to highlight to you all that every speaker is a member of IAB Europe. So if you'd like information on how to get involved with future activities, please do contact Lauren, Marie-Claire or Georgia from the IAB Europe, and they'd be happy to kind of discuss any opportunities coming up with you. But before we kick off, as we like to do on this, we want to establish a bit of a stakeholder breakdown of the audience. So I'm going to put a quick poll out to you. So if you wouldn't mind, please complete the poll that is on your screens now, and we'll share the results with you shortly. Of course, as well as doing this poll, you can actively participate in today's event, as each panel will be followed by an audience Q&A. So if you have any questions for today's panelists, please do submit them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom window. Okie dokie. So hopefully you will be voting away. And I think the results should be coming up on screen shortly. Here we go. Okay, so 57% of you guys are at AdTech, and we've got a few publishers in and a couple of agency people as well. So it's always good to know who we're talking to, and thanks very much for taking part in that. Good to have a great spectrum across the board. So thanks for completing the poll. Now we're going to go on to our first session, in which our Senior Digital Advertising Analyst, Tom Suttle, will present the connected TV landscape in Europe. So Tom, making his debut at one of these virtual events, it's over to you.
Morning. Yeah, thank you so much. Just take over the screen. Right. Yeah. Here we go. Yeah, thanks so much. Really excited to be here talking about CTV. So yeah, I'm the Senior Digital Advertising Analyst at the IAB Europe. So I'm largely focused on research and market intelligence in digital advertising, mainly focused on ad spend numbers in Europe and globally, and how they're sort of shifting and changing over time. And what do we think are the key trends that are going to be affecting the industry in the future? So I just wanted to start off with a few quotes. We can see here that Philip Schindler, Senior Vice President of Google, said that connected TV is our fastest growing screen. And we think there's a ton of runway ahead. Brands getting the best of all worlds, the precision of digital with the scale of linear, and a lot more relevance. The Trade Desk said connected TV continues to be our fastest growing channel at scale around the world. And Pubmatic said our CTV business, inclusive of OTT, grew more than 6 times over last year, Q4. So that's 2021 Q4 over 2020. So we can see this huge growth happening in the industry. And you can see here that the Trade Desk mentions the connected TV in earnings calls has been continuing. So this is just gives you a sample of what in the earnings calls companies are talking about. So of course, it's talking to shareholders about where are the opportunities. For the Trade Desk, CTV has become a really hot topic where they see growth. And mentioning it a record 53 times in Q3 2021. And similarly, Google, mention of TV and connected TV, you can see has been increasing over time. So Alphabet, and you can see privacy here just for a bit of context. They've been talking about TV and connected TV more than they've been talking about privacy recently. And that's because Google is seeing some huge opportunities to win TV ad budgets globally. Of course, they have Chromecast and also opportunities on YouTube. When we start to look at the global advertising market, you can see that Google's total ad revenue globally is actually already bigger than the TV market. It's 190 billion euros. The global TV market is worth 156 billion euros, and with YouTube down at 26 billion euros. That's really important because as Google, of course, are getting excited about opportunities in connected TV, they're also putting money behind that in terms of solving some of the problems that exist in connected TV, which of course will be talked about later, such as measurement and attribution. Just having a quick look at the global CTV market in totality, you can see that global CTV was worth 2.5 billion in 2014. It's projected to reach 18.5 billion globally this year, up to high of 30 billion by 2026. So this global CTV market is hurtling at a really fast pace. When we look specifically at the European digital ad market, you can see we are forecasting 14.4% growth here at the IB Europe in 2022. Some of these numbers are a little bit outdated for 2021. We're yet to have to compile our full results for 2021, but some of the numbers that are coming through are even stronger than that 28.6%. So we may yet see that number come up. But the main message is that the outlook for digital advertising remains strong in Europe. When we start to look at what are the key growth areas for digital ad spend, CTV comes in at number 2. I've excluded YouTube from the numbers just to show the opportunity outside of that. You can see that only retail media is expected to grow at a faster rate than connected TV in 2022, with CTV forecast at 35% up year on year. And the recent study we did backs that up, a study we did in partnership with Pubmatic, the IB Europe, looking at the key video growth areas over the next 12 months, and connected TV came out as the fastest growing channel. And when we look at the drivers of digital video advertising investment, expanding the reach of TV campaigns, of course, which connected TV can help with, things like better targeting and personalization of video ads are what advertisers and brands are looking for. As we start to look at the European landscape, obviously this is video trends in general, so this is not just connected TV. But this just gives you a sample of course, what's being viewed, right, in some of the key countries in Europe. You can see that Europe's quite fragmented in terms of players involved. There's public broadcasters, there's a mix of paid and free services that people are watching. YouTube coming in number 1. Also got the likes of Netflix, Amazon, Disney Plus, and of course the endemic local players featuring highly as well. So quick question that I had, and you don't actually have to necessarily answer this, but how many SVOD subscriptions do you have in your house? I've had a look at the number of subscriptions of SVODs in Europe. We can see, and you might be unsurprising to see that it's been growing, right? The number of households having 3, 4, or 5+ subscriptions has been increasing at a fast rate in recent years, with the number having 5+ SVOD packages quadrupling in the last 4 years. The amount of SVOD subscriptions people have are going up. This meme is American focus, of course, but so it shows you that as well. You know, if you were to have all of the SVODs at the moment, you can end up paying $91 in the US, which is more than you would have originally been paying for cable in the US. And I think, you know, HBO Max has been talking about sort of a free horse race that potentially only 3 or 4 of these SVODs will win out with the current business models that exist. And of course, not to be doom and gloom, but inflation is rising. We know that the cost of living is going up. We're looking at the Eurozone specifically. You can see here that inflation in March 2022, these are really recent numbers, is at its highest level for a long time. And when we look at a country level, of course, that's not just happening in Eastern Europe, it's happening across Europe. And therefore, subscription VODs, of course, may be one of the first place to save money for certain households. And we're starting to see that in the Netflix numbers. Netflix Q1 2022 lost subscribers for the first time. They lost 200,000 subscribers globally in Q1 2022, and they're projecting to lose 2 million in Q2 2022. Now, if you were to exclude Russia, they would have actually grown in subscriptions in Q1 2022, but US and Canada subscriptions went down 600,000 in that period. So Netflix is starting to see that fatigue of SVODs, saturation of that market, plus the cost of living starting to affect the success of their business model. And CNN and Plus also was a new streaming service that recently came out, and it shut down in less than a month. Again, with that saturation of SVOD models, there are some other things at play here. There's the news-focused content and takeover that happened. But I think it's a sign of this. Perhaps people are not really willing to spend any more money on subscriptions at this point. And what does that mean? Well, there's a big changing landscape. SVODs are bringing out AVOD tiers. So HBO Max in mid-2021, they launched an ad-supported tier. And they also launched in the Nordics at the back end of last year. They just launched in 15 countries in Europe just a couple of months ago as well. Amazon launched IMDb TV in November 2021 in the UK. And they just announced last week that they're changing the name to Freevee, like TV, but Freevee. And they're launching in Germany this year. So they're pushing their AVOD model. ITV have announced ITVX. So ITVX is a new streaming platform that ITV are going to bring out at the back end of this year, which has content available before it's broadcasted, as they look to compete with some of these big players in the subscription market. Disney Plus announced an ad-supported tier, which is no surprise considering they own Hulu, which already has an ad-supported tier in the US, which I'll come on to in a second, and their Asian version of Disney Plus already has an ad-supported tier, and Disney makes around 5 billion a year euros in ad revenue already. YouTube launched an AVOD, so they now have a lot of TV programs available on YouTube in the US. And we've seen, of course, the big news was Netflix launching an ad-supported tier, or at least exploring and potentially bringing one out at the back end of next year, which, considering they've seen the model has already been proven with HBO and others, is no real surprise. An example of how that works in the US already is Hulu, who I already mentioned, is now predominantly owned by Disney. They have two main options. You've got the ad-supported plan, which is $6, or you've got the $12 plan, which is no ads. And you can see they promote the ad-supported one as most popular. And some rough estimates that we've pulled together look like about 67% of users pick the ad-supported plan. And that's good news for digital advertising in general, because the value exchange is much more clear here, right? If you're deciding to have a cheaper plan, then with ads, you've decided to make that decision. Whereas some of the free models, of course, maybe the value exchange is less clear to some people. So what is the potential size of Netflix advertising business? I looked at a crude modeling of what the Netflix business could look like as it stands. Now, this is a bit North American focused, but because Hulu is the best example of a hybrid AVOD model. If, for example, all things were equal, which is very unlikely, but if everything was equal, so just a crude analysis, right? Based on Netflix's audience size, they'll be making about 5.1 billion in North America, euros in advertising, and that's bigger than Twitter and Snap's advertising businesses combined, just for a bit of context. So that's the kind of general trend we're seeing with potential saturation of SVODs and growth of these AVOD SVOD models. When we look at the total visual entertainment business in Europe, we can see currently AVOD, as both in relative and absolute terms, is behind some of the other regions. So AVOD makes up 12% of revenue in Europe, and that's because the TV and paid TV and naturally their TV ads businesses have held up stronger in these regions due to, of course, there's differences in pricing models and all sorts of regional reasons for that. But we projected that will, change. The current AVOD market in Europe, therefore, is worth 10.8 billion in euros. Of course, if it was around the 22% mark or 24% mark like these other regions, it would be about double that. So there's about a 10 to 11 billion opportunity there in euros for the AVOD market. When we have what does that mean for the rest of Europe? I guess, European broadcasters are still, of course, really key to the European landscape and how that continues to evolve. And when we look at the revenues of a few selected companies of European broadcasters this year, in euros, they've tended to have really strong years at the moment. Managed to keep hold of a lot of that pay TV and TV advertising revenue and beat the revenues that they had in 2019. And if we look at specifically a couple of different companies, we are seeing them see a lot of growth in the streaming areas. So ITV posted 40% growth year on year, 2021 versus 2022 in streaming compared to their total at 24%. And the RTL group was up 31% on streaming. They're a slightly more SVOD model against 10% in total. But streaming remains a small percentage of the European broadcasters' revenue. And it'll be interesting to see as these US players bring out more advertising support models in Europe, how that will start to shape out. And that will be key to what happens in connected TV in Europe. So we're seeing US players operating more in Europe. I already mentioned HBO Max just launched in 15 countries. Pluto TV, they're an AVOD service in the US. They just recently launched in Italy. They're already available in a couple other countries in Europe. Roku launched its player in Germany last year. Discovery Plus launched in the UK. These are just a few examples of AVOD services from America launching in Europe recently. Of course, it's early days, quite nascent businesses for them in Europe at the moment. But of course, it will be an interesting development. And I'd be remiss not to mention the TV makers. So obviously, I've largely focused this presentation on the AVOD growth. But of course, some of the key players in smart TV in Europe also are the TV makers themselves. Samsung, of course, have Samsung TV Plus, their own platform, an AVOD service, LG. And these TV makers are fastly, pardon the pun, but fastly tying in with new fast TV channels in Europe. So they're enabling the growth of these ad-supported streaming channels happening in Europe. So there's lots of opportunities in Europe for partnerships, both there's threats from competitions, but there's also lots of opportunities for collaboration and partnerships happening at the in lots of different levels. So there's lots of moving parts, of course, happening. And the other interesting development, I've already mentioned this a little bit, but retail media, of course, is the fastest growing channel in this year in Europe. Here's an example of retail media on CTV. So IMDb TV have shown some ads where you can buy things on Amazon Prime via the smart TV. I think the powering of these new transactional data sets in retail media and the growth that's happening in that industry will naturally also make its ways to connected TV, which in its very nature is connected and therefore interactive and actionable advertising. So those are some of the key trends that we see happening in the industry at the moment. And all this growth and all this change has led to a lot of activity in the M&A ad tech industry. So 2021 was a bumper year for mergers and acquisitions in Europe and globally. We saw CTV really pushing that. So identity, CTV, and the consolidation of the mobile ecosystem were the three key trends that were driving M&A activity in 2021. You can see, for example, Magnite buying SpotX. Lots of companies involved here in the space of either SSPs or involved in the measurement and attribution space and targeting within CTV. And Q1 2022 saw that trend continue. You can see here a few examples of that's estimated deal value of the purchases that happened in Q1 2022 in the CTV space, like World, TV Squared, Video Intelligence, all being purchased, which is really a sign of the interest at shareholder level of CTV. But hurdles to growth, of course, remain. Whilst there are lots of expected growth in inventory available in AVODs globally and in Europe, of course, measurement, and obviously we've got a panel on this coming up later, is a key hurdle to growth at the moment. Obviously, there are efforts underway, but there's still a long way to go for that sort of true cross-stream actually measurement. There's a fragmented market and ecosystem, which obviously I've already mentioned quite a lot. There's lots of players involved, especially in Europe, in ad tech and different broadcasters, and how they work together to create a scaled CTV ecosystem will be the key to growth of the market. There are still some inventory concerns in certain regions in Europe, like the Netherlands, which has a really high pay TV penetration. Of course, there's the development of the programmatic ecosystem. Direct and programmatic direct are the predominant methods of buying CTV, and budget controllers and expertise in CTV. So who actually owns the budgets, of course, for buying CTV? I think that is changing and improving over time, but has been a challenge so far in connected TV. You know, of course, a TV buyer is buying in a direct programmatic world, or direct programmatic buyers buying in a TV world. And then finally, CTV targeting. There's obviously a real need for sophisticated and contextual targeting, privacy-proof in CTV, which perhaps doesn't currently matured yet. So CTV, of course, is just one aspect of the total ecosystem. With walled gardens existing, of course, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, the challenger gardens, likes of Shopify, retail media with Carrefour. So there is that real need at the European level to coordinate and build this scaled ecosystem. So that's almost it. So the key takeaways really from this analysis is that connected TV is a key growth area on Wall Street. We see that with the mentions in earnings calls at Google, the Trade Desk, and among many other companies at the moment. It's a real key area for shareholders and investors. The AVOD market, or the hybrid subscription and ad-supported models, are really expected to flourish this year and in future years. Potential saturation and SVOD coming up, and the challenges on the cost of living. M&A activity, obviously I briefly mentioned there, but are really a sign of the opportunities and challenges that are present in the ecosystem at the moment. And of course, the fragmented nature of European landscape, which means there's a real need for Europe-wide collaboration for a scaled ecosystem. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's it on the presentation. I hope that was useful. Of course, I know there was lots of stats and facts in there. So of course, this deck will be available to share for anyone who's interested as well. Thank you.
Nice one. Thanks very much, Tom. Really fascinating look into the connected TV landscape there. I think there continues to be so much movement and development in this channel. So your presentation certainly given us a lot to digest and a lot to think about. So thank you very much. Now to aid that digestion, we're now going to hear from our first panel of the day, moderated by Gregor Fellner, who's the Director of Business Development at Rakuten Advertising. And they're going to discuss the latest developments helping to shape the connected TV landscape, and we'll share everything you need to know about connected TV in 2022. So don't forget, you can submit your questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll review the questions and we'll put a selection of them to the panel at the end of the session. Over to you, Greg.
Thank you, Ryan. Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to have this stellar panel today here and to moderate this panel. My name is Gregor Fellner. I'm Director of Business Development at Rakuten Advertising in Germany. And we are monetizing Rakuten TV, one of the main players in the CTV space here in Germany. We're expecting Claire Ritchie also to join this great panel, Global Head of Programmatic at Mediacom. Unfortunately, due to personal reasons, Claire is not able to join the panel session today. She shares her apologies. But you know, we have enough experts, so I would like to start with Paul and ask him kindly to introduce himself and maybe make a general statement on how he views CTV in 2022.
Thanks, Gregor, and hi everyone. My name is Paul Gubbins. I work for a global CTV ad server called Publica. And what I'm really excited about this year is the increase in application of programmatic technology in TV advertising. I think eMarketer recently put out some stats that illustrated 7 in 10 CTV ad dollars were transacted off the field via programmatic last year. And it's not just those AVOD and fast apps that are attracting that programmatic demand. It's increasingly the broadcasters. And we've seen some really cool innovation in the UK from the likes of ITV around Planet V, and increasingly further announcements from other broadcasters as well, such as Channel 4 and what they're trying to do in the programmatic space. So I'm thrilled to be here today to discuss the evolution of TV, but also more importantly, how we can bring increased addressability to it. Thanks, Gregor.
Thank you, Paul. Over to you, Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I'm Sarah Lewis. I'm Global Director of CTV at Show Heroes. We're a video, media, technology, and content company. I'm really excited to be working in the CTV space right now. I think we're on the cusp of a big shift in user behavior and user understanding, which is going to really drive the CTV AVOD kind of growth over the next couple of years. So yeah, very excited to be speaking with you all.
And last but not least, Jason.
Yes, thank you, Gregor. Jason DeMarco, I'm here on behalf of Index Exchange. Prior to Index, I spent about 15 years on the publisher side. And what I'm really excited about is kind of what Sarah and Paul already touched on, which is this transformation of kind of the ecosystem and the monetization and the strategy by which we go to market as publishers and inventory sources. So I'm excited about the technology and kind of the opportunities that are at the precipice and not our fingertips right now.
Thank you, Jason. So speaking of opportunities, and we heard about a lot of opportunities in our presentation this morning. Sarah, what do you think is the biggest opportunity in terms of CTV in Europe right now?
Yeah, I think there's a lot, which is great. I think the biggest opportunity that I kind of see was very much touched on obviously the presentation we've just watched, and that's the boom in AVOD. You know, users, as I kind of mentioned, there's a slight shift in user behavior and actually understanding the value exchange between receiving, you know, free content in exchange for advertising. You know, and I think that is starting to change and really give a lot of opportunity to CTV publishers to actually reach bigger audiences and produce more content. You know, SVOD services like Disney and Netflix, they, you know, obviously they've been in the news and you know, considering these kind of models and will be launching these kind of models. But I think they very much had a stronghold as SVOD apps in the CTV space. And I think that stronghold is loosening. I think we're really seeing this kind of pave the way for more VOD and fast channels to actually really capitalize on this audience kind of understanding now and audience, you know, audience want for actual free content. And that obviously is good for users because there's more accessibility. There's more content for them to access and people want a range of content. And also it means, you know, for advertisers, there's the chance to reach a much bigger and more varied audience on a very engaging platform. So yeah, so a lot of opportunity across the board, I think. Oh, you're muted, Gregor. Classic.
Sorry about this. I was just wondering if Paul or Jason want to add something to it.
I think from my side, Gregor, and to echo what Sarah was saying, I think it's about discoverability this year. Several years ago, very few people had the will or knowledge to go through multiple menu channels on their connected TV to find AVOD or fast services that they could stream. But increasingly, TV manufacturers are now becoming advertising businesses as well. So they're putting those services front and center, and they're making it very easy for us as TV viewers to discover those services. So I liken the CTV app ecosystem to where mobile was probably 10 or 12 years ago, before the app stores really productized search, and they made it very intuitive for users to find those services. And I think that's the journey that we're currently on at the moment. It's about discoverability, and more people now, due to the cost of living, are proactively searching for those ad-supported apps on their connected televisions.
Yeah, I think Sarah and Paul hit on it, right? It's the options and kind of access points for the consumer or the viewer have basically exploded. They've become exponentially more. There's so much more volume. And as advertising technology, advertising partners, we're playing catch up. And to Paul's point, mobile, it was the year of mobile for 10 years. So we had an opportunity to catch up. We have not seen this type of growth in viewership and kind of consumer transition to a new medium or platform. It's not unheard of, but like we don't have something else to compare it to. So I'm really excited about the opportunity where we're going, but we're playing catch up. Like we've got to find the consumer, we've got to find the viewer, we've got to make sure that we're putting meaningful advertising in front of them. Once again, like mobile, which you know, we had a little bit more lead time, but yeah, we're in the third inning, or second inning probably. So
I agree, and I think
a lot of opportunity.
Sorry, yeah. I think we have to shift our mindset as well, because as you said, we haven't seen anything comparable, and we can't just take the strategies and things that we were using on TV or digital. We have to kind of actually adapt it to something that is effectively a new platform, and make sure we're not just going, we'll use the, you know, copy and paste that kind of strategy. Again, we have to adapt it to something that is a shared screen. You know, there's different kind of nuances that we have to consider in lots of different factors of it. And I think shifting that and making sure it's tailored to that screen as it grows really, really quickly, and we need those developments really, really quickly, is, yeah, definitely.
It's a hybrid approach, right? It's taking the best of digital planning and buying, the best of TV planning and buying, and converging them for, you know, this new way of targeting users, because it's still TV, right? Everybody says, you know, AVOD, fast, CTV, there must be a lot of education with clients, a lot of education with agencies, but fundamentally it's still the big screen TV that's in the corner of my living room. But the way we target, the way we measure, the way we attribute, that's what's changing, and that's changing very quickly.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Paul. It's still the most engaged, kind of like lean back, but highly intentional, engaged environment, right? The viewer, the consumer, the buyer, whatever you want to call them, made a very explicit decision to watch that content. And that content is going to have ads that are not skippable, and they're there, they're engaged. So as long as we make that experience valuable and fulfilling, it'll benefit everybody in the long run.
Agreed.
Yeah, we're actually releasing a research piece next month, so I can't give too much away, but actually it all actually looks into the engagement of the user and the attention on the screen, all using, you know, eye tracking glasses and electrodermal response to actually understand the brain activity, as well as, you know, the user's gaze. And you know, the findings you'll be able to see next month, but it is that actually that screen is so valuable when it comes to attention and engagement, and being able to couple that with digital innovation, though there are challenges obviously, but being able to couple that together is, yeah, is extremely valuable.
Yeah, we were touching point or base on many challenges already in the catch-up game, and I think one challenge is definitely the data strategy in CTV. So, what have you seen in this space? So, what are the right data strategies going forward?
I think data is now available to target, but as we're seeing, certainly from a European perspective, TV manufacturers and those streaming services that are launching in Europe from the US are still trying to navigate what privacy looks like. Although there are rarely cookies in CTV, because the CTV ecosystem is predominantly derived from apps, TV manufacturers and streaming apps still have to adhere to the same local privacy regulations. So data is available today, either first-party data or third-party data, for CTV publishers to surface within PMPs, but increasingly, those on the buy side behind DSPs are trying to figure out the best way to engage with users on televisions in a privacy compliant way. And that's why we're starting to see the more scaled deployment of consent management platforms by TV manufacturers and streaming apps to ensure that when they do target their users, they're doing so in a privacy compliant environment.
Yeah, I think there's a good question on that from the audience. Daniel was asking, how do most CTV providers go about obtaining consent to process end user data for the purpose of interest-based advertising, including measurement and targeting? You were touching base on CMPs.
Yeah.
Maybe you can comment on this, Jason, Paul.
Yeah, so I looked briefly before I came on. I did a little bit of research on the IAB website, and according to them, there's currently 13 CMPs that are registered for CTV versus 80 plus in the digital space. I think that illustrates where we are on that journey. But to answer the question, a publisher would use that consent management platform and then configure that in line with the TCF guidelines to illustrate notice and choice to their viewers when segmenting them in targetable PMPs.
Cool. I think you have seen, especially Jason, you're in the US, a lot of good success story making use of the user behavior change. Can you comment a little bit on this?
Yeah, I think it's important that as an industry, we don't get kind of caught in a bottleneck around data or privacy and these types of kind of concerns. Yes, that's important. Addressability is important, but let's remember that like this is the viewer, and TV viewing has shifted to the CTV experience, where we've seen a great deal of success on behalf of some of our publisher partners is not just within like the original demographics of the younger 16 to 24 viewer, but now it's the older, right? It's the ones with discretionary income. It's the 45 to 64-year-olds that notably are unmeasured by Nielsen a lot of times, but they're also transitioning, right? Like there's a lot of viewership that's happening in, call it niche verticals or highly valuable kind of segmentation, that as marketers, we need to make sure we're taking advantage of that, right? We have the opportunity to target, measure, and serve meaningful advertising. Let's take advantage of it. I think some of the success that we've seen is largely around how the buy side is able to lean into these inventory pools, call them private exchanges, call them kind of one-to-many, or a curated open marketplace, right? And as the buyer and the DSP can lean in with their buy side decisioning and algorithms, they can now start to pick the meaningful and kind of highly targetable user in real time, which is not necessarily applicable in a one-to-one PG or PMP deal. So that's where we've seen a lot of success. You know, I think there's a long way to go. We have to make sure that we are, you know, 100% like strict on the guardrails of compliance and security, and making sure that there's no fraud or bot and so on and so forth. But the successes are coming from high efficiency, improved yield, and kind of super serving both sides of the equation.
Just to add on the data side as well, though, data doesn't just have to be user data. Content data is actually really important as well. So we're starting to see a lot more solutions. Like we have a semantic targeting solution, for example, where we're using the data around the content, much richer kind of metadata around the content to understand and target based off of that. And, that really is based on how enriched the metadata is. Yeah. So it's not just about collecting user data. I think as a screen, contextual data is extremely important, but it's making sure that publishers kind of enrich that data as much as possible so that the tools that can target contextually have as much information as possible and then can target with much more nuance and understanding. So I think there's another kind of element to the data side as well.
And I would say that's a really good point, Sarah. Piece of work that we've been doing recently at Publica is to try and help publishers bring increased granularity when it comes to content targeting within the actual streams. If you look at linear TV advertising and take a step back, for many years, it's been very easy for the advertiser to understand what's happening within the show and plan and buy around that and measure around that. But in CTV over the last couple of years, it's been quite difficult to get any real depth of information around what's happening within the show beyond the show name, the title name, or the service that's actually streaming it. So context, we certainly feel at Publica is going to be a major driver of yield for streaming publishers as they activate the tools to give the insights back out to those buy-side clients that really want to start planning and buying granularly around what's happening in the show itself beyond the show name.
Exactly. So having some kind of standardized terminology and things as well being passed in the parameters. You know, it is being done, but not enough at the moment. So that's definitely something that needs to progress. Sorry, Jason, I interrupted.
No, you're fine. I love the points that are being made, and you're right. We got so far in programmatic to be target the right person at the right time, the right ad, and we forgot about like the emotional component of it, right? Targeting somebody that's in the right experience, watching content that is contextually relevant to whatever the ad experience might be, still carries a lot of weight. And you know, as Paul mentioned, Publica and Index are working very diligently on kind of like the genre and the categorization of the metadata of the content, right? Making sure that we're able to bypass some of the audience targeting to make sure that the contextual relevance makes sense. A car ad inside of a show or a movie about cars carries a lot more weight than maybe a car ad that has nothing to do with, you know, content that has nothing to do with cars.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's also because of the type of screen and the actual viewing experience, because we've got to remember it's not a one-to-one connection a lot of the time. This is it's a communal viewing experience, or it can have, you know, your TV in your living room could have 4 or 5 people maybe watching at the same time, or 4, 5, 6 people who use that device. So like having data on the use is, you know, absolutely going to be a benefit, but we also have to remember that we can't identify who's exactly in the room. So sometimes being relevant to the content that everyone in that room is watching is another way of kind of tailoring it to the kind of campaign and being effective.
That's strong signals, and it's good that you stressed again that it's a one-to-many medium. And I think there is also another, let's say, a strong advantage, and we saw it in Tom's presentation of CTV, which is, you know, the right ad, the execution of the ad, and the creativity of the ad, and the interactivity. We saw retail media ads. Have you seen other, you know, great executions using the interactivity of CTV content?
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, Paul.
No, go on, Sarah.
I was just going to say there's actually been a user behavior change that I think is really driving this, and that's the use of QR codes. You know, obviously QR codes aren't new; they've been around for ages, and they have little dips and resurgences. But during the pandemic, we got used to using QR codes far more in our daily lives because ultimately we had to, as our, you know, our pass to get in everywhere. And that's now developing into, you know, I was at the airport a couple of weeks ago, obviously my boarding pass and my COVID pass and everything was a QR code. I ate at a restaurant and scanned a QR code for the menu and scanned a QR code to actually pay. That's becoming much more integral in our daily lives. And that has enabled some creativity in ad formats. So we look at the Coinbase ad that ran during the Super Bowl in the US. It was, you know, a great execution of bouncing QR code and had 20 million scans of it. We're actually starting to do this in Europe as well. We're running a QR code CTV campaign right now with eBay that is giving, you know, an element of, you know, enhancing the format, but also some, you know, convenience for the user and being able to scan and be taken straight through to the product. So yeah, there's definitely advancements in that space.
And I think, Gregor, as well, those advancements are going to be driven by a new type of advertiser entering television for the first time. So, you know, as an industry, we spend a lot of time talking about transitioning linear TV advertisers into addressable TV. But I think step one for many of those advertisers are advertising on broadcasters' BVOD services, where they can still measure holistically like they've been doing for the last 50 years. But when you look at the growing AVOD and FAST app ecosystem, we're now seeing more advertisers coming from digital, coming from social, DTC advertisers that don't have the same legacy requirements around measurement, but are quick to take advantage of all of the data that's now available on the big screen TV to them for the very first time. So when it comes to measurement and attribution, I think the innovation is really going to be expedited to meet that kind of increase in ad dollars in TV that is going to be slightly separated from the traditional TV advertisers, while they still try and figure out the best way to transition from linear into addressable.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Paul, right? Performance marketing, or what we call DR, direct response marketing, and advertisers in the US that are looking not necessarily for demographic targeting or measurement, but they're looking for the performance. How many people are going to basically convert, call a number, go to a website, and purchase a product? Those types of marketers are moving right now into CTV because they're seeing the downward trajectory of TV, of live linear, right? And CTV is becoming the medium by which they can actually get into the living room, get into that experience that the viewer is, again, going back to that lean back, highly engaged, right? And it's turning the KPIs in their head. They're delivering better performance metrics than they ever have in DR. So CTV kind of, we hit our, not even our stride, but we took our first step, I think at the right time, as a lot of these DTC marketers came into the TV ecosystem and found a medium by which they can measure the performance, not necessarily the targeting or audience.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, we at Raccoon TV also introduced into interactive ads just because of what you just said, and but we are confronted often with a question that also comes from the audience, which goes that someone asked how you measure or isolate the effect of CTV addressable targeted viewing versus linear, and how improved are the effects to offset the far larger input costs. So I think that's also a classical question, comes from TV clients moving into BVOD, then going further to CTV only players.
I think, and I have some experience on the TV side, broadcast cable networks. It is a very difficult objective to measure the effectiveness of an ad in an isolated experience, right? Whether it's a live linear experience or a CTV. I think what we need to start to understand as kind of a marketing ecosystem is that the whole experience by which we engage with consumer as marketers and brands has to be meaningful at each and every touch point. I don't know that, if I'm understanding the question correctly, I don't think you can isolate CTV and the effectiveness of CTV versus linear unless you're going to not run linear for 6 months and only run CTV, turn off CTV, run linear, and then do a kind of disjointed measurement and kind of rolling 6 months afterwards to see the effectiveness. I think it's more about telling a story. It's more about brands and marketers and publishers finding ways to make the user experience, which is for the viewer, consumer, right, which is the same person, having a seamless transition between content and ads, and making that non-disruptive. Let's make it fun, which I think is part of what Sarah was talking about with the Super Bowl commercial, right? Like make it something that people want to engage with, enjoy, and talk about. But I don't know that the measurement thing is an isolated form. I don't know that that's possible unless you're really gonna take a big step in the direction of meaningful research, which is not necessarily good for the bottom line.
I think on that, if you look at what some of the, and I agree, Jason, some of the TV manufacturers now via ACR, automatic content recognition, they have the ability to tell an advertiser whether or not somebody's been exposed to an AVOD and FAST app versus a linear show, because they've got that proprietary technology on their device, it's all privacy compliant. So that's innovation that's coming from the TV manufacturers that are increasingly building those advertising businesses. In isolation to that, you have the broader measurement debate that's playing out in TV at the moment. And there are initiatives that have launched in the UK. One of them is called C-Flight. It's really good, actually. It's got the likes of Sky, ITV, Channel 4 included in that to give advertisers a view for the very first time around what's happening on broadcast, but also broadcasters' BVOD services. But when you draw a line in the sand, it's very difficult for an advertiser to get a holistic view across the BVOD space and the quickly growing AVOD and FAST ecosystem. And that's where things start to get a little bit disjointed. So when you look at exposure in broadcaster BVOD versus exposure in AVOD, it's still really, really difficult to do that at the moment. There's a ton of great innovation, certainly coming out of the US from companies like iSpot. But at the moment, if I was to answer that question or to try and break it down, I would say you've got the TV manufacturers who are really well placed to answer that question via ACR data. Then you've got all of the other innovation that's happening around what the future of TV measurement looks like to give those on the buy side a better view around reach, frequency, and attribution across all TV, right? Viewers don't distinguish. TV isn't broadcaster, AVOD, BVOD, FAST. It's just TV content. So we need to get better as an industry of giving advertisers the insights that they need to increase their spend in addressable environments.
In the meanwhile, we talked a lot about content signals and using more of the content rather than other demographic signals. Someone from the audience asked if it's not better than to avoid targeting age and demographics at all.
I don't think it necessarily has to be excluded. I think it's something that should be considered, but maybe in line with context as well. Like if you've got a particular kind of channel that is aimed at a particular demographic, and then you also know that there is someone who is that age and demographic in the household, you've got a little bit of kind of reassurance that the two and the likeliness of it being that user. Of course, that gets complicated because layering on strategies, and we would then have to make sure that there's a strong data set as well as strong content data, and make sure that there is then overlaying that there is scale. So there's definitely challenges with that, but I don't think it should be dismissed. I think it just needs to be considered when doing media plans. It can't just be like, okay, we use, we target 18 to 24-year-old males on our standard online video, strategy. Let's just do exactly the same thing. Then it has to be considered in line with the screen and with the content that's on there.
Yeah, I don't think we can get rid of kind of audience or demographic, demo and age. That's the currency, right? It's been the currency for 40 years. We're starting to see a transition into more national addressability, but that's still rooted in kind of like behavioral or age, demo, geo. So I think the currency will, whether good or bad, will still be somewhat rooted in kind of those demographics.
Cool. So I would love to know to speak to you all day long, but being time conscious, and also the good news for the audience is we will stick around in the IAB, so you can reach out to us with more questions. But to make the last round, basically, I would like to ask you what do you see how the CTV market will evolve in the next 12 to 18 months, even in front of the cost of living discussion, especially. So, Jason, what is your take on this?
Yeah, I think the efficiency of CTV, right, and a lot of what we talked about today, with the targetability, the addressability, but also kind of that yield component for the publisher also, is going to actually help marketers. And the cost of living component that you just touched on means, as cost of living goes up across the globe, marketing dollars have to be that much more impactful, right? The ROAS is going to change. So I think we're going to be creative as an industry. I think we're going to be much more reliant on machine learning and kind of technology, and really finally adopt automation and programmatic for CTV. For the last 7 years, we've been taking IOs and putting them into SSPs, and now we're going to actually leverage technology. And that's what I'm excited about. That's where I think we're going in the next couple of 18 months.
Paul, put out your glass ball and tell us what's going on in 12 to 18 months.
Oh, if I knew that, I'd be buying their ad tech stocks right now. I think for me, exactly what Jason has said and what Sarah's been discussing already, it's about bringing increased addressability to TV advertising. I think there's a lot of work still to be done behind the scenes to improve what ad breaks look like. Again, traditional TV advertisers have had a lot of controls over the last 50, 60 years in linear television, and to expect them to transition their ad budgets into addressable TV when there are still difficulties in managing frequency, competitive ad clash, positioning ad pod. I mean, the technology now exists to solve those problems for publishers. It's something that we're quite passionate about, and building those solutions at Publica. But for me, it's addressability, it's building better ad breaks that ad buyers will want to target. And then it's that measurement component, really getting under the skin of how that will work and give the buy side one holistic view over their TV ad spend, and not continuing to differentiate between broadcaster supply versus AVOD supply or fast supply, treating TV in its entirety.
Yeah, and from my side, I think from a user perspective, subscription fatigue is reaching that tipping point now. People, want value for money. And I think they're starting to realize that, having loads of SVOD subscriptions isn't essential now to be watching content, because there are free alternatives that are ad supported. So I think we're going to see a huge growth. Obviously we've been growing, over the years anyway, but I think this is a big tipping point from that front. But also hopefully that growth is going to, as the guys mentioned, push forward some of the standards that have been, developed in order to make this a better ecosystem. I think as an ad tech industry, we can be a little bit hesitant sometimes, like, oh, we'll wait and see if everyone else, kind of adheres to those standards. Then, oh, do we need that one? No, I think this growth and this, CTV becoming an essential part of a lot of advertisers' plans. I think, and I hope to see much more adherence to particular standards and much more consistency across the industry over the next year.
Thank you all. We can't end the panel without asking the audience if they have any other questions. So we're still having 3 to 5 minutes to answer them. While we're waiting for more questions, I would like also to ask you, what devices do you think will come up next? I mean, there is a lot of device strategies out there, new TV sets from many manufacturers, but also OTT players. What is your thinking around glasses and stuff like this?
I think we're a while away from the Google glasses or something being widespread. But I think there's interesting developments, right, in things like wearable tech and things like that. I personally think that the impact of TV and the lean back environment that it provides is very, very different to some of the developments out there, and it will have to be very much tailored to the screen. But one thing that I think in the device development kind of stage is, it's really interesting to see something like Sky, for example, releasing Sky Glass, something that's been very synonymous with traditional kind of cable, satellite, subscription TV, adapting to the point where it's, releasing its own smart TV, Amazon releasing their own TV. I think there's going to be some really interesting developments in that space, making smart TVs becoming the norm, and that being what is released by the manufacturers as pretty much only and standard now.
Yeah,
I agree. The smart TVs, Sarah, have not really kind of, developed or partnered with the wide swath of content partners yet to build out the apps. There's a lot of opportunity still for content to be
Definitely
provided to us as viewers and consumers right through TV. So I think that in the near term is probably the biggest opportunity or change in viewership. The OEMs have a real big opportunity right in front of them.
And I think we'll see a lot of innovation from those TV manufacturers when it comes to retail media capabilities. What does shoppability look like in TV advertising? Again, it's a mechanic that hasn't really been leveraged thus far in traditional TV ad buyers, but we now have the capabilities, we have the data, and I think that will be the next battleground. How does a TV manufacturer or streaming service get a viewer to convert within their environment so they can own the last touch attribution piece? And Gregor, sorry, I didn't mention in my previous roundup, but if there are any viewers that want to better understand how CTV advertising is evolving from the buy and sell side, they should look at the new OpenRTB 2.6 specs. A lot of really cool innovation in that around bringing greater targeting capabilities for advertisers, more controls for publishers. And that really gives you a good overview of where we currently are on that programmatic CTV journey at the moment. So highly recommended reading.
Perfect. Thanks for a little bit of advertising at the end. You know, at the IAB, and I think in each and every company that we are representing here are tons of good research and also specifications and definitions. So the audience is welcomed, you know, to reach out to us, to look around at the IAB sites and our company sites to find more information about this really interesting and precious topic, CTV. The biggest screen in every household, the honeypot, as I call. Everybody wants, you know, to take a dip in. And yeah, you will hear more about it in our next panel about measurement and tracking. And of course, more to come at the IAB around CTV. So thank you very much for taking part in the panel. And it's now over to you, Ryan. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thanks, Gregor. A fascinating discussion, and thank you to our panelists, Claire, Sarah, Paul, and Jason. Yeah, thanks for all your insights, your knowledge. Yeah, I know our audience will have have much to think about off the back of that. So yeah, thank you very much again for taking part in what was a really interesting discussion. Now, we move on to our next panel of the day, which will address the challenges and opportunities for targeting and measurement in connected TV. And I know many of you will be out there wrestling with the issue in connected TV and want to explore the targeting and measurement options, as well as the best practices further. In fact, the IAB Europe released a guide earlier this year to help provide an overview of targeting and measurement capabilities currently available, as well as to share key considerations for the buy side. So we'll pop a link to the guide into the chat box for you now, so you can have a look at it in your own time. But for now, let's move on to the onto the panel. As we go through, please don't forget to submit your questions for the panelists using the Q&A box located at the bottom of your window. And as you can see them, you know, the moderators will be surfacing those questions and letting our panel discuss them as we go through. So without further ado, please welcome the moderator for this session, Jessica Traynor. Jessica is the Vice President of Ad Platform Partnerships at Comscore. And over to you, Jessica.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our panel session today. As Ryan mentioned, I'm Jess Traynor, Vice President, Ad Platform Partnerships at Comscore, where I oversee partnerships with leading ad tech firms to increase industry adoption of Comscore's third-party targeting and measurement solutions. I'm really excited to be joined today by experts from Adform, Kantar, Samsung Ads, and PubMatic to discuss CTV targeting and measurement. And with that, I'd like to have each of our panelists introduce themselves and tell us a little bit more about their roles. Lizzie, I'll start with you first.
Thanks, Jessica. Good afternoon, guys. I'm Lizzie Wiltshire. I'm head of client solutions at Samsung Ads in Europe. My team look after both programmatic and managed service campaigns and make sure that campaigns are set up for success at the very beginning, that they are optimized throughout the campaign, and then most importantly and most relevantly for this panel, that we help clients to understand how their campaigns have performed against their KPIs at the end of the campaign.
Fantastic. Anya, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Jessica. And hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Anya Hofmeister, and I am in ad tech in various product roles for more than 10 years now. And in my current role at Adform as product lead, I am highly engaged in our identity and audience activation products. And I'm driving education and knowledge sharing in all areas of our business. So I'm in close contact with our clients to educate people also about CTV and all the possibilities out there.
Great. And Christiane, I'll throw it to you.
Okay. So hi everyone, Kristan Roberts. I'm working at Kantar. I'm really focused on enhancing our media and creative measurement solutions. So obviously CTV is a small part of the media portfolio, but obviously the focus for today. So nice to meet everyone.
Perfect. And last but certainly not least, Hitesh, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Jessica, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm Hitesh Bhatt. I'm Senior Director for CTV for EMEA at Pubmatic. And in this role, I help develop our CTV strategy and then guide its execution across the different markets. So in this role, I work with our various different teams across the business, different markets, publishers, broadcasters, and also our buy-side partners as well.
Wonderful. So I think CTV is such a buzzword right now. So I'm sure we have a lot of people tuning in for this one. And I think we can dive right in. So Hitesh, I'll throw the first question your way. Measurement is such an important piece of advertisers' marketing strategy. What do you see as the #1 challenge we're facing with CTV measurement today? And how does this differ from 12 months ago?
Okay, thank you for picking me first. Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest challenge, this was touched on in the previous panel as well, is around kind of measurement across screens, particularly across TV and digital and CTV. I think there are lots of different solutions out there, lots of different really interesting data sets, different ways of measuring, but there isn't any kind of standardization. Everybody owns different data sets, but there isn't kind of definitions and so on that are aligned. There also isn't any independent verification. So, you know, it's kind of businesses' data rather than an independent body kind of tracking and measuring stuff. So I just think that's the biggest challenge. It requires a lot more collaboration. Has there been much change in the last 12 months? I don't think so, to be honest with you, without sounding too negative. I think there's a greater urgency, but I just think there's more work to be done. And it's starting to happen, but I think there's a way to go.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I think even at ComScore, there is such a challenge, like you said, across different screens, being able to truly measure that deduplication. And of course, with CTV being a multi-user device, right? You could have many people watching that. Anyone else have comments on what Hitesh mentioned there?
Yeah, no, I would just sort of, parrot what Hitesh said. I'm in full agreement. I think, it's an obvious point, but CTV's coming of age in a very different regulatory environment to digital, when that came of age 15 years ago. There's so much more sensitivity around tracking, measurement, and, because of that, a huge, much more caution, particularly at Samsung Ads. We act in a very judicious and sensitive way when it comes to working within the GDPR framework, and therefore it has just proved so much more difficult to give advertisers the measurement they need whilst also protecting consumers.
Absolutely. And Anya, I would be interested just from your standpoint, even if there's technical or things we're running into with CTV that's a bit more of a challenge than maybe traditional TV.
Yeah, so we definitely see great excitement about CTV and its opportunities amongst our buy and sell side clients. But as we already heard, a lot of confusion still from terminology over tools to metrics. But the main challenge, I think, still is to fight fragmentation silos. And we have to do so with standards and guidelines that we set early on, and collaborate with publishers, advertisers, vendors, and manufacturers together towards an open, unified programmatic digital video buying that includes all flavors of CTV. And I think that we can achieve some scalable targeting and measurement standards, because that's the only way how we can improve user experience at the end. But there's some good standards on the way, thinking about OpenRTB with ad podding. So we're really looking forward to see all those things happening.
Great. No, I think you're spot on with the standardization. And that's, I think, why we've all been involved with the IAB here. And like you mentioned, even OpenRTB, these different groups that are coming together. I think a lot of companies are ready to jump in and help with that standardization. So hopefully, Hitesh, 12 months from now, we'll be saying we're actually in a better spot. With that, I wanted to also ask about, are we making any progress around some of these challenges that we're seeing in the industry across the board, whether it's publishers and advertisers and measurement companies? Is anybody seeing any progress that we could point to at this time?
I mean, I think there are some good conversations going on to get a bit more collaboration longer term, depending on which area of measurement we're talking about. I think when you talk about, reach, frequency, that kind of area, it's slightly easier than when you talk about brand measurement, which obviously has to include some form of survey. But I think it will take time, because I think, and I guess to add to what everyone said already, there's so much complexity we have to deal with in some ways in TV beyond just digital. We're talking about injecting technology into an industry that's been around for decades with very different behaviors and localization. So for example, when you're looking at measurement in different markets, there's different TV suppliers. So there are some, that operate multi-market, the likes of Sky, Samsung will have multi-market coverage, but then there's also localization that we see. So I think it will take probably more time to grapple with some of the challenges. And I think, in the previous panel as well, Paul made some good points around the technology. So not only do we have different broadcasters and different providers, but there's also different technology platforms to deliver the content. So I think, the progress is slow, but I think there's at least, I think, some traction in conversations, particularly when you look at more of the audience measurement side of things.
Yeah, and I think when you mentioned delivery of the content, because there are so many different options and ways that this is coming through, going back to the standardization, things are being passed through programmatically and through to measurement providers in such a differing way based on those devices. I don't know if other people are seeing that, but yeah, I think you make a great point around that as well. Perfect. Well, this one is near and dear to my heart around activating and targeting. And I'd like to spend a little bit of time on this. And maybe Lizzie, I'll start with you with the Samsung ads perspective. I would love to know how you're tackling CTV targeting, maybe some of the good things that are happening there, but also some of the challenges that you're still seeing with CTV targeting.
Sure. So as an OEM, we're in a lucky position, I guess, in that we have a fairly sort of unique set of data from automatic content recognition, as well as understanding the devices that are plugged into a TV, so for example, games consoles, and that gives us a really sort of unique data set, which I think is fantastic, and obviously we help our clients to be able to leverage that as much as possible. The challenges for us are much more around leveraging third-party data. So again, as I said before, Samsung approaches everything in a very sort of cautious fashion. So we need to make sure that we're doing everything absolutely compliantly, and so allowing advertisers to target things like demographic and purchase intent are an ongoing challenge for us.
Yep. Hitesh, any thoughts on your end with the targeting piece?
Yeah, absolutely. We're looking at it in lots of different ways. So we are working with third parties to bring in third-party data, so people like LiveRamp and so on. We're also developing ways in which advertisers can bring their own data to help target against those data sets. And again, touched on in the previous panel, I think content and context is probably the key one at the moment, just because that's the way TV has been bought for so many years. So it's really just helping buyers of TV understand and buy in the same way as they would do on CTV. I think the challenge there has been that I think it's fair to say publishers have been relatively slow in terms of pushing content data programmatically. So we've actually launched an initiative and a product quite recently called Content Object Targeting, which uses IAB standard definitions to allow publishers to push things like the show name, the genre, the language, the content length, and so on. All this stuff really just helps buyers, I guess, drive up demand. I think the challenge has been historically operationally for publishers, but also I think some have been reluctant to push content data because they didn't want buyers cherry picking the best shows, right? So what we're enabling is allowing them to develop different price floors for different shows and different content to just help alleviate that particular issue. So I think right now context is probably the biggest thing we're pushing.
And I'd actually love to ask you a follow-up question on that. I think it's very interesting, like you saying, helping publishers to pass genre, show different information. How have you seen it coming through? Is it does it differ pretty widely? And to your point, is it pretty spotty as far as which publishers will provide what type of information?
Yes, to both those questions. It does differ and it is pretty spotty. I think that, to be honest, many publishers are just getting stuff up and running at the moment. And I think the IAB have helped, because creating the kind of standards and the definitions and the taxonomies just means there's consistency in terms of the data that the people are pushing. So I think it's early days yet. We're making a big initiative around getting publishers to start pushing this, because it will drive up demand and it can help drive up pricing as well.
Great. Anya, what are you guys seeing over on the ad form end? Similar to Hitesh, or any differences there?
Not so much. Actually, what he described is just one of the challenges that we're seeing, which is that most of the CTV inventory is still locked up in deals. We don't see much open programmatic buying yet. Publishers are protecting their inventory due to lack of controls, and obviously the aforementioned contextual controls and open RTB standards will help, hopefully, as more and more of those open measurement SDK are picking up CTV aspects. The other challenge that we're seeing is the fragmentation of supply and identity solutions, which is a challenge that we also see with other cookieless environments now. And it starts from finding the right audience, frequency capping. We do partner with publishers and marketers to bridge those gaps and stitch the isolated solutions back together while still protecting the publisher's property.
Got it. Great. Yeah, and I think that, like you said, a lot of the inventory is still being locked up in deals. My hope is that in the future, as publishers get more comfortable, and maybe that's partly as measurement continues to grow and become more enhanced, that they'll get more comfortable putting more of that inventory through the open exchange for programmatic targeting. But Hitesh, to your point, I think we still have several challenges just from a perspective of if each publisher is providing different information, it does cause a challenge even for contextual based targeting, which I know on the ComScore end, we've been talking a lot about contextual, of course, with all of the privacy regulations that have been happening. And Lizzie, you guys are definitely lucky, as you mentioned, to be having that ACR tech and kind of being directly in line and getting some of that information. So thank you guys for sharing around targeting. And I think we had a little bit of more of a positive spin on targeting that we had on measurement. So hopefully we keep seeing measurement pulling us in that direction. Okay, great. The other question I wanted to ask you guys, so it's no surprise that lockdowns have accelerated the growth of CTV consumption across households. In fact, in the document that the IAB just released, they noted that across the EU5 markets between January 2020 and May 2021, traditional TV viewing rose only about 17%, whereas CTV consumption increased by 55%. So huge difference as far as the increase. What I would want to know is, has this advancement in consumption of CTV, has this helped the measurement conversation? So maybe we still have challenges, but have you started to see more bodies coming to light, or started having more conversations? And maybe Christiane, I could throw that one to you to hear a little bit from your perspective.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it was interesting. We did a lot of research as well from Kantar perspective in terms of how the pandemic and the various lockdowns impacted behaviors globally. And I think, the growth of CTV viewing and TV viewing in generally obviously opened up some great opportunities for advertisers. And I think from a measurement perspective, one of the challenges we've had, depending on, I guess, the form of measurement we're looking at, particularly for the brand measurement, one of the biggest challenges was that CTV reach was relatively relatively small versus the traditional linear TV. And so when your reach is small and you need surveys to understand attitudes, then you're talking about much smaller pools of people you can interview. So I think the growth of CTV will definitely enable more measurement solutions as we move kind of into the future. I think it is important, though, to understand that all of these changes in behaviors across the pandemic are still moving today. So, I think we're seeing, the recent news that Netflix subscriptions are down because people are cutting back with the cost of living crisis in the UK. And I think as we move out of the pandemic and people kind of adapt to the new kind of ways of living, maybe slightly more working from home and balanced commuting kind of lifestyles, I think we'll continue to see the shift in behaviors. So that I think it's very important for advertisers to understand for their brand how their consumers are, consuming their media and the time they're spending and the programs they're watching and things like that, to help inform those conversations that they have with media agencies around which CTV channels are maybe the most appropriate, and how they're, and then we can look at what the measurement of those are, because I think there's a range of measurement solutions that are available. Obviously, that kind of the golden chalice that we want of that complete cross measurement of everything with audience through to brand is not really achievable in the form that we have. There's always going to be some kind of something that you can't quite do, but I think there's always going to be something depending on what the client's question is, and what they're trying to achieve out of the measurement, which I think is the key piece.
Yeah, I love that you brought up the point of more eyeballs watching CTV, like the survey example you gave, that is ultimately going to help measurement if you have more people there. So that's a wonderful point. And Lizzie, would love to hear from the Samsung Ads perspective. I mean, you guys, I'm sure, are seeing continued increase in viewership, but would love just your perspective on the pandemic and kind of increased CTV consumption is potentially impacting measurement or the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to sort of repeat what Hitesh said. As more and more people are watching TV outside of traditional linear, the challenge around measurement becomes more pressing. And the positive thing, as Christiane said, is that then leads us to be able to do more effective measurement, especially when it comes to things like brand, getting greater crossover with panels. It becomes an awful lot easier. We are also seeing the same trends as Christiane mentioned. So obviously, a move into streaming and CTV consumption, the cost of living crisis, and the impact that that's having on the landscape. And I think we need to sort of accept that it's going to constantly evolve. We've been working with Ipsos, and we did some research which essentially backed up that idea. Just over 60% of respondents that we saw said they'd be willing to watch ads on TV in exchange for free content, given the rise of streaming costs. And I think that is just going to grow. So I think that we kind of need to keep our eyes open, I guess. And to Christiane's point, it's important that advertisers keep searching and keep learning out where to find their the audience that they're looking for.
Yep, definitely. Anya, anything to add there, just from the ad form perspective?
I think more a general note that I think our industry is very good at adopting a change and responding quickly to the markets, and we can learn from other areas where we had to, like the third-party cookie deprecation or GDPR, and I think that's what makes our industry so fascinating for all of us. And I'm very positive that we can also tackle the CTV measurement challenge.
Yes, no, I agree with you. I think that we continue to come up against different challenges, right? Whether it is privacy regulations or new channels like CTV, but to your point, the industry is able to rally and get people behind it, and smart people that want to solve and figure out new ways of doing things. And that's probably why we're all in this industry, because it's ever evolving and changing, which makes it exciting. Great. So with that, wanted to talk a little bit about, there's various solutions that are being developed to meet the demands of buyers and advertisers for cross-media measurement, and helping to ensure campaign reach and frequency across TV and digital. Have you guys seen that any of these have been effective to date? And I'll kind of throw that out to anybody, that if there's anything you've seen around that, the cross measurement and reach and frequency and helping advertisers there.
I mean, I think from a Kantar perspective, we've got a number of different solutions that we've operated in various markets, and I think the market difference and the different providers that come in, and I guess the different legislations and the measurement techniques that are available do vary quite a bit, which is part of the challenge when it comes to CTV within the broader scope of a larger media plan. I think there's definitely options that are available. I think the challenge that we often have with advertisers is the scalability of that. So, we ran a study in France that looked at cross-media measurement across TV. We used ACR technologies, various providers, to deliver and look at how, you know, the impact of that advertising, you know, had synergies between digital and TV and multimedia. I think the reality is that a lot of advertisers would really like to have that technical understanding from those kind of panels and the ACR technology, I think, but it becomes expensive to scale. And so it's always one of those things where I think historically we've done these one-off studies in different markets, and, you know, you test the concept, it works. But realistically, is that scalable globally, and are advertisers willing to invest in that? And I think that's often where the barriers have become. So I think we often find that our advertisers are quite like some of the other methods we have, you know, the opportunity to see methods where we ask questions around their consumption behaviors, and we try and map that to media delivery data from, you know, the likes of Samsung or other providers to get more of a modeled approach to that. And I think often those kind of methods, which are more scalable and slightly more responsive to the differences we have in different markets, the biggest challenge has historically often been the reach of that CTV activity. So I think, you know, as we said previously, maybe the reach and the consumption increasing for CTV might help us to develop some of those methods a bit more.
Yep, definitely. And Hitesh, would love to hear from your perspective. I'm sure you're working or seeing different providers coming in and out. So would love to hear if you've seen anything that's been effective, or any anecdotes you can share there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there are a lot of different point solutions, right, that can measure cross-screen reach and frequency. And in themselves, they all work really well, right? ACR data is fantastic, you know, to track what's being viewed on the screen. Different methodologies. If you look at the broadcasters in the UK, they've created C-Flight, which measures kind of linear and then broadcaster VOD. So there's some really innovative ways of measuring this. I think the key to all of these is measuring it against the kind of the standard industry standards. So in the UK, that would be BARB. So allowing new measurement tech to measure against kind of existing models and panels. I think it will happen. You know, I think that, you know, there are some challenges. I don't want this panel to appear quite so, I guess, you know, challenged, should we say, because this is early days yet. I think we're at a tipping point. You know, if you look at the large streaming services available now, the ones that are coming along quite soon, you know, you have Discovery Plus right now, you've got kind of Paramount Plus, Warner Brothers, HBO, Netflix potentially in the future. I think that scale will really help. And I think that will drive advertisers to push more and more for kind of standardization and for people just to work together. I think what's benefited other sectors of the media is joint industry committees, so JICs, independent bodies that can pull together all the data sets, verify it, and effectively give it a seal of approval. So I think that will happen. And in, I think, 12 months' time, it will be a different situation. But yeah, I think there are lots of different solutions that work really well. I just think the best combination will be having a bit of everything.
Yep. Anya, did you have anything to add there?
Maybe only that we're from at home watching the WFA Cross Media Measurement Initiative quite closely, because that could really be a game changer if all the privacy, scale, and integration concerns are addressed. But still remains to be seen if we can overcome the technical, political, and collaborative obstacles.
Yep. Yeah, I think ComScore also with the WFA, that's something that we're working closely with that team. And like we were talking about, these industry bodies coming in and kind of helping to get us all moving the ship in the right direction. So yeah, that's fantastic. This more of a easy question, but I think it's good to talk about just KPIs. So what have you been hearing from buyers and advertisers? What are their KPIs when they're thinking about CTV measurement? I know we talked about reach and frequency, but what other things are they asking for, or are you being being asked for from buyers?
I think business outcomes, right? So alongside reach and frequency, there's a whole range of advertisers that CTV opens up, direct to consumer, just more DR, performance brands. And I think the fact that CTV combines traditional TV with the strengths of digital means that there's more ability to measure attribution and results and business outcomes. So I think that that's a real kind of positive for this area in terms of driving whole new areas of advertisers that perhaps didn't use linear TV or couldn't afford to, that can now be spending money in a different way and measuring the results in a more definitive way. So I think that there are various businesses that are supporting that. And I think that will drive a lot of the growth, certainly while reach and frequency is being worked on.
Great. And Christiane, I know you mentioned some of your surveys. What kind of key questions are advertisers looking to understand with that?
Yeah, and it's really been a range, and I think the key thing was probably in your question in terms of the KPIs. So what KPIs are the clients, looking? So I think we've always sort of advised clients when if you're going to ask your media agency to implement CTV, then make sure you're clear on what the objectives are. Are you aiming to drive reach with that activity, or are you aiming to target specific consumers? Are you trying to drive different messaging? And so depending on what their objectives are for the media, then we kind of design the research methodologies around the best way to get to that. So we do a range from sort of that reach and frequency and helping them understand where they're managing to target certain consumers, whether they're getting overlap and synergies between different media types, and really helping to drive their objectives, and then through to sort of more of the brand and outcome elements. So things like, is it raising brand awareness? Are you managing to drive some of those key messages that you're trying to differentiate your brand with? And then obviously there's bigger you can do MMM modeling that looks at more the long-term outcomes and your branding impact. So it's really a really broad spectrum, and often what we kind of challenge our advertisers on is to really get down to sort of what are the objectives you're giving your suppliers and your media agency, so that we can help you understand whether you're achieving those, I guess.
Yep. Lizzie, I think we're going to maybe jump in, so I'll hand it over to you.
No, absolutely. I think that the KPIs that we are typically being asked for are those where we can provide a unique view, and that's sort of fundamentally how it differs from digital. Things like for video games publishers, we can help them understand lift for exposed play versus unexposed play, which is a fairly unique perspective. Incremental reach is something that non-media and entertainment brands come to us a lot. They want to be able to reach those that haven't been exposed to their linear ad, and we can build an audience and of linear ad exposed, and then suppress those from our targeting. And so, depending upon the advertiser, as Christiane said, and what their KPIs are, those are the kind of the key KPIs that the advertisers are coming to Samsung Ads to be able to meet, which are sort of different to those that they'll be able to get from a digital campaign.
Yep. Incremental reach. I love that metric. And I think that is something that a lot of buyers are asking about, right? If they're moving into CTV, what does that mean compared to linear? Because oftentimes, rather than comparing CTV to desktop exposure or mobile, they're comparing it to linear exposure and wanting to understand, is there a unique audience that I can find streaming that I'm not going to reach with linear? So yeah, I think that one's going to continue to be a key metric that we'll hear about. Of course, until we get to the point where linear and CTV have completely blended and we're no longer talking about them as separate silos. Any success stories, and Lizzie, maybe you kind of touched on this a little bit, but any success stories that you can share just that you've seen with some of the brands you've worked with for CTV?
Yeah, so I'll go back to a linear reach extension campaign we ran. So Vodafone ran a campaign with us. They wanted to encourage consumers to switch their broadband supplier. They had achieved a really strong reach amongst the heaviest linear consumers, around over 90%, but was really struggling with reaching those cord cutters, the non-linear and the light linear viewers. So, as I mentioned earlier, we are able to create a dynamic audience of people that we know have been exposed to the linear ad, and then we can exclude that from our campaign. On top of that, which was, I guess, a bonus, is that we're also able to layer our NACR data. So in this instance, we layered on people who we knew were heavy streamers and people who we knew were gamers, and therefore had the greatest likelihood of wanting to be able to get a faster broadband speed. So in terms of results, we got, I think it was just over about a 12% incremental reach across the Samsung campaign, which was equated to around, was over 300,000 additional households. And also, which is great for the advertiser, we saw a really strong video completion rate, again, over 90%. And I guess on top of that, the bonus was that that incremental reach was amongst people that would otherwise be really hard to reach with a linear campaign. So again, amongst those light linear and those cord cutter audiences.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's good to hear some of the good things that are happening out there. So that's wonderful. One other question wanted to hear from you guys are with your buyers and advertisers you're working with, and maybe even for Anya and Hitesh from your angle, are any still hesitant to move into CTV at this point, or is that last year? Have we broke down those barriers and most are ready to put CTV on their plan as a mainstay and something they're looking to really dive into at this point?
I think they are not hesitant, they're still testing. Not all of them. I think there are some agencies or brands which are more progressive and more advanced in this area. But I think everybody knows they're going to be spending in this space. That's the thing. I think they're just kind of figuring out what the best approach is, working out how what their objectives are going to be, how they're going to measure it. So I think there's a strong desire. I think there's a kind of, we're at the tail end of a test and learn phase, and I think the tipping point is very soon where we'll start just seeing more and more entering this world.
Fantastic. Anya, similar on your end?
Very similar. Not every advertiser is an innovator or has the resources to do this testing early on, but we see more and more people reaching out and they're willing to do those tests. And yeah, it's an exciting area.
Yep, great. Okay, and then would love to hear from all of you on this. What do you guys find most exciting about working in the CTV measurement space? And anybody can start with this one. I think there's a lot of things, but yeah, would love to know just what motivates you and what you're looking forward to.
I can go first if you want. I think for me, it's like the constant change. I do really like there's always something different that comes up. And I think, even the recent discussions that are coming about Netflix potentially delivering ads in platform. And I think there's so much change, but which I think is, can be daunting and threatening when you think about, it's just another challenge from a measurement perspective. But I think it's those challenges that really make it interesting. And I think it's one of the things that I like working in these industries is that there's, always something different that you can, and a new challenge.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I've spent half my career working in traditional TV, half in digital. So I'm delighted that there's an area that combines both of those and makes me still relevant. I think that, I think TV is the most powerful ad medium, right? And I think CTV will be transformative. And we're at the early stages of that. And I think that's very exciting. And ultimately, it will just continue to allow great content to be funded, which I think is vital.
Fantastic. Anya?
Yeah, I think we're in an excellent position right now with the proven tools and capabilities we have from digital video and programmatic buying, combined with the experience from linear TV and measurement, bringing this all together on the most exciting screen in the house. And yeah, I think it's fantastic to be part of the industry that will shape a new fun TV user experience.
Great. And Lizzie, I'll hand it over to you.
I agree with everything that's been said. For me, on top of that, I think it's the unique data sources. So getting that really holistic view across smart TV usage, be it with gaming or health apps, as well as OTT and linear. I think the unique position, the unique data sources are super interesting. And I guess also I feel like the smart TV is really solidifying itself at the heart of the home. And as we see the usage expand, we'll also see the data available expand. And I think that's really exciting.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think I'm excited about just more standardization like we talked about. I think that CTV, there's such an opportunity. And as we were mentioning, advertisers are ready to start using it. Yes, there's still testing that has to happen, but I truly think next year, most advertisers are going to have this as part of a mainstay on their plan. And we are going to start getting more standardization from the publishers who are producing this fantastic content that's going to allow everything to work a bit more smoothly. It's just a learning curve, right? This hasn't been a standard that we've needed. So it's going to take some time to have all the pipes built and everything flowing in a standard format. We did actually get a question from the audience, so I wanted to throw this one out. And if anybody has thoughts, you can definitely speak up. So do you see advertisers setting up a CPA-based KPI campaign on CTV? And Lizzie, I think your example kind of gave a little bit around that, right? For maybe not necessarily acquisition, but yes, growing that group. But any other thoughts on CPA as a KPI with a CTV campaign?
I think from our perspective, possibly not. We are working on helping advertisers with, rather than cost CPA or CPV, making kind of guarantees, I suppose, or to help advertisers feel confident with perhaps reach, or so that we can make sure that average cost per viewability or cost per view doesn't slip below a certain CPM. So we are perhaps going to put in some measurement around that, but I think from Samsung Ads perspective, probably not as a publisher, as an OEM.
Yep. I actually think you brought up a great point around CPMs, and it's not even anything we touched on at all in this panel around cost of CTV compared to traditional digital. How has that impacted advertisers, even through, I mean, Hitesh, like from a PubMatic perspective or from any of your perspective, do you think that's also a bit of the hesitation of, wow, I'm going to be paying, a bit extra and I haven't proven out that this channel is going to have the impact I've needed? Do you guys think that's part of the hesitation, or not as much?
I don't think price is well, depends what the price is, right? But typically what we're seeing, I don't think that's a huge barrier for brands entering this space. I think the measurement, particularly, I mean, if we're talking about CPA, it is possible if you're looking at digital acquisition. There are businesses that can measure kind of exposure to the commercial on the TV and then look at whether people went to a particular site or purchased a product or downloaded an app. So that capability is there. There are brands who are using it, and I think that area will continue to grow.
Fantastic. Any final thoughts? I think going through this panel with you guys, I think that, yes, we started out a little bit on the negative side, talking through all the challenges, but I hopefully, the audience is getting that there's a lot of positivity and there's a lot of opportunity still left to be had with CTV. We're still a bit in the early days, which is funny to say because I know it's been around for a while, but we're still in the early days. And I think that also just seeing different companies collaborating, it's only a matter of time before we're in a really great spot with CTV. And there's always going to be challenges, but I think we're all here and ready to tackle it. So I wanted to thank you guys all for joining. And I think Ryan from the IAB will be popping back in a moment here. Hi, Ryan.
Hey, Jess. Thanks very much for that, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for a great panel discussion and for sharing all your insights and how you see the measurement opportunity for connected TV continually evolving. Are we doing a Q&A now, or are we moving on?
I think we're ready. I was looking for questions, so I think we're good to move on.
Okay, great. Nice one. Thank you very much, guys. Yeah, just as a reminder, then, guys, yeah, there's the IAB Europe's Guide to Connected TV and Targeting and Measurement that is available on the IAB Knowledge Hub. And thanks again to all of our panelists, Hitesh, Lizzie, Anja, and Kristan for a really great discussion there. Now then, we're on to our final session of the day. So please welcome Shalay Singh, SVP of Product Management and Global Programs at the IAB Tech Lag from the States. In this session, Shalay will share some recent and upcoming standards releases and revisions to support the growth of connected TV and cross-media video. You'll learn how the new features will make buying, selling, delivering, and measuring connected TV safe, transparent, and a TV-like experience for advertisers and consumers alike. So without further ado, over to you, Shalay.
Hi, I'm Shalay Singh, Senior Vice President of Product Management and Global Programs at IAB Tech Lab. and welcome to CTV Advertising Standards from IIB Tech Lab. I'll walk you through a quick overview of Tech Lab and then take you through our priorities and then quickly jump into the CTV standards that have been in existence for some time, that have been recently released, and some things that we are working on going forward. So Tech Lab is a global organization, as many of you may be aware. We have over 750 companies as our members, and we engage this community to develop foundational technology and standards that are geared towards enabling trust and growth in the digital media ecosystem. What we do is we bring together all of our members to collaborate in a neutral and transparent environment so that they can develop interoperable and efficient base for innovation for their products and for the industry. We do all of this to ensure that the industry can take advantage of the programmatic transactions, the scale and the efficiency of the programmatic transactions and operate in a frictionless marketplace on all of the prominent platforms where consumers consume content, be it connected television, be it video, display advertising, audio ads, or mobile advertising. Our priorities, so we have identified three priorities with feedback from the industry. The first one that's in the center is, of course, some of the key challenges that the industry is facing due to the loss of the traditional identifiers and privacy regulations and the steps taken by key platforms on privacy, which is where we are helping the industry to understand the next generation of addressability and privacy frameworks and privacy systems that need to be put in place. The second area of our focus is security and fraud, where we have standards like ads.txt, ads.cert, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. We have our compliance services to ensure that you're working with a partner in confidence. We also developed the Transparency Center there to ensure that the industry has all of this metadata available that is required to maintain a secure supply chain and mitigate fraud in the ecosystem. Of course, the focus of today's presentation is one of on connected television, which is also a priority area of focus for IIB Tech Lab. Where we are looking at making the delivery of the ads much better, and then improving the measurement that is available on the connected television environments. And we'll also look at sometime later in the year on audience and what could be a common currency and how do you measure and map that. So without much wait, I'll jump into the on the connected television standards. But before we get into that, what we are trying to do is we are trying to create a TV-like experience for the connected television environment. So a lot of the long-form premium content is moving towards the digital or connected televisions from your linear television, and consumers expect the same experience, just like they watch TV, a seamless ability to seamlessly watch content that they watch, expectation of low latency ads that they expect, and then similarly, the buyers are also looking at the same experience that they've been used to on buying ads on television, linear television. They want to take the same experience and be able to buy in a similar fashion. And of course, the publishers and sellers are all also at the same time trying to look at the same sort of fill rates that they expect on on television to have the same on the connected televisions. So that's what we're trying to do, to create better fill rates for sellers and publishers, a better buying experience for buyers, and better measurement capabilities. And in turn, that should create a seamless viewing experience for the consumers. So how do we do that? So we have a multiple set of standards that take care of different aspects of this TV-like viewing experience. So we have VAST, which is the video ad serving template that's been around for quite some time. And we have made changes consistently to account for CTV environment in that. Then recently we made changes to the digital video ad formats, which I'll talk about later. We also created the CMID, or the new interactive standard for interactivity in the ads. We are also working on OMSDK for connected television. We also have the app ads TXT that applies to the app stores on these VMVPDs and other channels, other networks. And then, of course, the OpenRTB. We started making changes to the OpenRTB to enable connected television ad buying. So let's get into VAST to start with. So we started working on VAST some time back to modernize the delivery of the assets that are needed to serve a video ad. The first changes were made by introducing the mezzanine file, which is kind of the raw file that allows the ad servers to be able to transcode based on their requirements. And also it has the ready to serve files capabilities. So the ad server can serve like 3 files of high, medium, and low quality, and the publisher, based on their environment, can decide and choose which one they want to show to the user. We also introduced server-side ad insertion capability that allows the user experience from content to ad and back to content to be seamless. Then we introduced the support for verification, which was earlier was built kind of into the vPage, would be separated out of vPage and created a separate place for verification scripts to be executed. And then with CMID, we introduced a much better way to introduce interactivity in the ads. And of course, there were other improvements like standard VAST interactive templates to enable certain types of specific types of interactivity. And you can find it all at iibtechlab.com/standard/VAST for more details. So in CMID, basically, one of the complaints against vPage has been that it takes control of the publisher environment or publisher video player. It's a black box JavaScript. You don't know what it's going to do. It has been multi-purposed, that it was designed for interactivity, but it does verification, interactivity, and anything else that the JavaScript can do. So we created CMID, which is a secure and safe way to execute interactivity in a sandboxed environment. It's an HTML file. It does not take control of the players from the publisher. It has better user experience because you can pre-cache assets. And the other beautiful part of it is that it works in the SSAI context. It's designed for that. So even if you have a SSAI workflow, you can still serve interactive ads. And it works in environments where typically, JavaScript is not allowed, for example, connected televisions. So that's for the interactivity in the ads on connected television. Now, one important update that happened recently is that the digital video ad format guidelines, which kind of define, what kind of resolution the file should have, what kind of size it should have, dimensions, and other, video specific aspects like, bit rate and frame rate, duration. So these were all defined in our digital video ad format guidelines, which had not been updated for quite some time, but we were able to, at the end of March, we updated those guidelines to account for of the connected television, large screen environments. So here, like three kind of highlighted main changes is what I'll talk about. One is the mezzanine file. So the mezzanine file was a capability in VAST, but there was no place where it was defined, like, how it is to be submitted and what are the details. So in this update, we've defined, that you need to submit like bit rate, frame rate, color space when you submit the mezzanine file. And also we've defined certain creative submission guidelines to include things like duration, the aspect ratio, and any engagement events that the file might have. The other thing that we defined is, because of the difference in size of the connected television compared to our regular laptops and mobile devices, we've included specific guidance for dimension, placement, duration, engagement, and controls for the CTV screens for the nonlinear ads or the companion ads. So those are the updates in the digital ad format guidelines. They're out for public comments until the end of the month. So I would request everybody to look at those and provide us any feedback that you think is necessary to be included in these ad format guidelines. So this is a big change. Like I was saying, so in OpenRTB 2.6, which just got finalized like a couple of weeks back, we have identified 3 things that are relevant to CTV, the changes that we've made, which are specific to CTV. The first one is the ad pods, which is the capability to sell multiple ad slots together or multiple ad breaks together. And I'll cover that in a little bit more detail. The other is the CTV context. So a lot of the CTV, one of the prominent use cases in CTV is the virtual multi-channel video programming distributor use case, where it's like a hulu.com, and inside that you're watching an NBC. So we've added capability to declare the content network and the content channel signaling information in the bid request. That provides buyers with better information as to where the ad is actually being shown. The other thing that is there is the CPM per second floor. So like a 15-second ad is not the same as a 45-second ad, and the pricing should be different. So there is a CPM per second floor declaration that a publisher can make in the bid request. Based on the length of the ad, then the CPM changes. So getting a little bit more into the ad pods. So if you look at any of the long form premium content that you watch on linear TV, you have an ad break which has like 2 or 3 or 4 ads that are shown together. In digital, in the old programmatic, there was never a need for something like that. So there was never a capability to be able to declare ad break with multiple ad slots. So in 2.6, that's the capability that we've introduced, that you can send a bid request by defining an ad pod, and you can do either a structured ad pod, that is ad slot 1, ad slot 2, ad slot 3, and the duration of that and the position of that. So the buyer knows that, I have 3 ad slots that I can buy. They're, one of them is 15 seconds, the other one are 30 seconds, other 2 are 30 seconds, and they can make the bid, accordingly. But we also added more flexibility into that, that you can also declare that this is an ad break, which is 1 minute, 30 seconds ad break. And you can have ads up to 15 to 45 seconds in it. So now the buyer can mix and match. They have flexibility based on the creatives that they have and the ads that they want to show. They can pick and choose and fill that dynamic ad pod with multiple ads, could be of varying lengths. So those are the 2 capabilities that have been introduced to support a TV-like buying behavior. What it does is, besides the flexibility it gives the buyers to introduce, to buy according to what their, to be able to place the buys according to their needs. It allows them to do competitive separation. Like if a brand doesn't want to be against or next to a certain brand, they can manage that. It makes sure that there's limited brand repetition in ad break. You can make sure that there's no ad that is repeated in ad break, which is sometimes very annoying for users to see the same ad again and again, and it doesn't give ROI to the brand if the same ad gets repeated in one break. So that's the flexibility that it provides the buyer, and the capabilities it provides the buyer to buy a pod for an ad break. So that's a very significant, important feature. It's finalized after all the feedback from the industry. It's available now for the industry to implement, and we look forward to everyone moving and upgrading to OpenRDB 2.6. So once you've bought the ad, you delivered the ad, next thing advertisers want to do is measure the ad. So Open Measurement SDK is our project where we consolidate all of our measurement work. We have the Open Measurement SDK for iOS, for Android OS, as well as for web browsers now. So this year we are working on launching 2 more SDKs for the OM SDK. One for tvOS, which is the Apple TV. And then the second one is the Android TV, which will cover devices like Amazon Fire and cover other multiple Android-based devices. What we plan to do is we do want to make sure that we have tested our SDK on each device. And so we will test it, and then we'll list the device that we qualify support for the Android TV SDK. Similarly, another scenario that we found was that a lot of the televisions have HTML rendering environments, which means that our web browser SDK, OM SDK for web browsers, can actually be executed and work for the measurement there. So there again, what we want to do is we want to test each device and environment, and then list that and make it available to the industry to look that we have qualified support for these TVs using the OM SDK for web browsers. So that way we will build up the portfolio of support for connected television measurement. Our goal is to have 45 to 50% of the inventory coverage by end of the year with the tvOS, Android TV, and qualified OM SDK for web browser support. Now, some of the capabilities that we have added for connected television, besides all of the other OM SDK measurement capabilities for impression, for viewability, geometry, etc. First thing we added was whether the TV is on or off, whether the device is actually connected to a television, and if the TV is on or off. The second one is where, especially use cases where people are binge watching for a long time, or there are, programs where the episodes kind of autoplay one after the other. So we want to make sure that we are able to pass some sort of a user inactivity signal to ensure that the measurement is done when user is actually watching the TV or not. And the third one is a CTV traffic identification. So till now we had signals for mobile and web. So we expanded that to include CTV traffic identification. And in future, that's going to expand more to be more granular about the device, etc. So those are the 3 capabilities that we've added to Open Measurement Interface Definition, or OMID. And we plan to launch this on tvOS, Android TV, and provide support for OM SDK for web for environments where it's applicable. So that was measurement. And next is wanted to discuss some of the standard work that's being done for mitigating ad fraud in the CTV space. Of course, our main standard is the authorization standard, which is the App Ads TXT. And then we've also introduced last year the ads.cert authenticated connection, especially for SSAI environments, so that you can authenticate and know the server that you are working with is the right partner that you want to work with. So for ads.cert, we have an open source library on our GitHub for all of the ads.cert implementation details. They are all available with reference implementations, and more work is being done on that. To support the ads TXT deployment and use, we've created the Transparency Center, inside which we have the supply chain data that we aggregate from all of the apps and websites. So we already have the Roku App Store data there for App Ads TXT. And if you didn't know, the Transparency Center is now open to all. It was earlier restricted to members, but now it is available to anybody who wants to log in and use the web application to do a spot check or check something. And then we also have the APIs for those companies that want to ingest all of the data into their own systems for more real-time checks. So that was my last slide with the ad fraud. Those are all the standards that we have already or are working on to support the connected television supply chain. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the event, and I look forward to the industry adopting these standards as quickly as they can. If you have any questions, you can either go to iibtechlab.com/standards. All of the information is there. Or if you have further questions, you can always write to us at support@iibtechlab.com. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Shally. It's a really important presentation to truly understand connected TV advertising standards and what's new for connected TV across the open RTB and open measurement and much, much more. So thank you for your time taken to share that with us. Right, well, we're at the end of our virtual connected TV event, and I'm delighted you're able to join us today. Thanks very much. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us, and we hope you found it as valuable as we did. I'd like to thank all of our panelists again and our moderators for giving up their time, sharing their knowledge and views on the important topics that we discussed today. And I'm sure many of our attendees would have taken an idea or more away that will be used to improve their own businesses. I'd like to thank Lauren Wakefield, Marie-Claire Puppet, and Georgia Cook from IAB Europe, who have worked hard to deliver this event. So thank you very much to them. I really appreciate the hard work you guys do in the background. So thank you very much. We also have some more great events coming up from the IAB Europe, including our flagship event, Interact, where we're excited to meet everybody in person once more in hopefully sunny Madrid on the 25th and 26th of May. Interact is a must-attend event for all the digital advertising and marketing industry. And this year with a central theme of driving the next digital decade. So we'll be covering a range of key topics on the agenda as we look forward to address and drive the digital advertising ecosystem forward. From the attention economy to connected TV, retail media, through to premium publishers, advertising models and sustainability, the latest policy and regulatory developments, and much, much more. We'll be deep diving into the next era of digital advertising. So please do join us if you can. For more information on the confirmed speakers and the agenda and how to secure your early bird tickets, please do check out the link in the chat box that is being posted there now. I'll be out in Madrid and I'd love to meet anybody out there. So please feel free to drop me a note, find me on LinkedIn, and we can grab a coffee or a glass of sangria or something. That'd be lovely. If you'd like to dive further into connected TV, we'll also have our latest industry insider with Show Heroes taking place on the 10th of May. So if you want to explore the world of connected TV further and gain insights from Show Heroes' latest research, please do be sure to sign up for these free sessions. And once again, a link to that is now appearing in your chat box. And finally, thank you to all of you for joining in and tuning in today. We really appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming on and doing this with us virtually. The event recording will be available on the IAB Europe website over the next few days. And as mentioned at the beginning of the event, all of our speakers are from IAB Europe member companies. So if you're keen to become a member and participate in any of our upcoming events or committees, please do get in touch with the team. So that's one more thing for me to say. And again, that's thank you and enjoy the rest of your day. And hopefully we'll see you soon. Take care now.